Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Doran. Graham, the weather outside is getting frightful, but the hoops have been delightful. Got to stay a little bundled up today. But we're going to get into the midweek, mid-major extravaganza. Anything on last night's slate that you want to hit on unrelated to these teams? Maybe UCLA's win over Purdue or Miami, Florida's loss to Florida State. Anything in that vein for you?
In general, I just think it was a strong night for road teams. You just don't see road teams win that often in conference play. I think that was what really Tuesday epitomized to me is Florida State winning a road game against Miami that really damages Miami's profile. Georgia winning a road game at Missouri that suddenly you look at Georgia's profile looks pretty good now. That was the win they needed to add a little bit of meat to the bone there. So that was really the big story of the night for me was just the teams that got those road wins started to separate themselves in a positive way. Teams that lost at home to underdogs, those teams really hurt themselves. So I do think we're starting to see a little separation now.
And we'll see if that trend continues tonight. Got some Big East games. It'd be bad if Villanova lost at home to Georgetown, but let's fire up the old spreadsheet here. Oop, wrong one. There we go. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's start at the top with Connecticut. Again, yesterday I mentioned we haven't really been hitting on the one seeds, but we both have Connecticut at 4 overall. I mentioned this or tweeted about it yesterday in regard to Vanderbilt, but 3 years ago, right, Connecticut started out 14 and 0, and then they lost 6 out of 8, and then turned things around, and they were a juggernaut the rest of the way. And I think they're going through a similar lull right now, except the Big East kind of sucks this year. I mean, they haven't played Villanova or St. John's yet, but they barely beat Providence, barely beat Seton Hall, barely beat Georgetown. Now, those were all road games, but not the, you know, not the 20-0 threat that we saw Connecticut as a couple of weeks ago. Do you still think there's a decent chance they'll run the table in Big East play?
Yeah, I do, only because I don't think the Big East is as good as it's used to being. If it was anywhere close to what I would expect the Big East to be, I would say no, I don't expect it. And I agree with you. I think they probably should have lost 2 or maybe even 3 games in Big East play had they just played stronger competition. They just didn't play teams that could close the job. I think UConn is their net rating is really showing something. A net of 9 in being 18-1 on the season. I think that shows a team that's underperforming a little bit compared to the competition as far as the way they're playing, not necessarily the results that come with it.
Yeah. So we both have Connecticut one spot ahead of Michigan, but you put those two teams on a neutral floor right now. I'm probably picking Michigan by 3.5, 4, maybe more than that. But you know, I know sometimes we talk about the committee, they'll say that like throw out the numbers, go shirts and skins or whatever, who would win, but resume wise, still Connecticut a little bit better. The other two teams that we both have in from the Big East, because I now have Seton Hall out, Villanova and St. John's. Johnnies have won 5 in a row, but are you worried about them in the long run? The fact that right they went 7-4 non-conference play and really didn't pick up any wins. Like, what would it take? Assuming they don't win either game against Connecticut, and again, I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but if they were to lose both of those games, what else would need to go wrong for them to slip from their current perch as either the bottom 5 or top 6, depending on which of the two of us you ask?
I mean, it really depends on how far down we're talking, right? I think if you asked me a couple weeks ago, I'd say St. John's was in some real trouble for potentially making the tournament. At this point, I'm not worried about that with St. John's. I do think there's a real problem if they lose both those games to UConn, because why should they be a higher seed than they are right now? I think that's a real question that the committee is going to have to wrestle with if St. John's can't beat Connecticut is what's the game that you point to and say, that's why that team should be that high up, and I just don't see it. So I really believe St. John's could tumble down the seed list more likely than they're going to rise up to that 4 or even 3 seed range. I think they'd have to be really good from here on out. But, we've said UConn's had some struggles, so maybe they could potentially win, maybe not even just 1, but 2 games against UConn. If they could get the sweep there, it would change their entire trajectory. I just think St. John's is probably going to settle into that 5-6 range. And I would lean more towards the 6 just because I think they're going to have to do something against UConn.
Yeah, I think the wins they've gotten thus far in league play, see them here at Villanova, at Creighton, at Butler. I mean, those are pretty solid. They also got that home win over Seton Hall last night. I guess maybe I could have put that ahead of at Butler. I don't even know which one's better at this point for third best win. But I think they've built up enough of a cushion that they probably could take, a bad loss or two, even if they don't redeem it with a win over Connecticut. Villanova, I'm not so sure about though. They beat Seton Hall. They won at Wisconsin. I don't know if that's actually counting. I mean, it was in Milwaukee. It should probably be a road game. I don't know what it'll go down as when all is said and done, but not a whole lot of, to borrow your phrase from earlier, not a whole lot of meat on the bone there. If they were to lose those 2 games to get against Connecticut and don't pick up the rematch with St. John's, which I assume is at Madison Square Garden, could they be in some trouble, even though we both have them coincidentally right at 26 overall right now?
Yeah, I think they could be, and I think when you're talking about the Big East in general, there's just so many games that don't do a whole lot for your profile. But
Yep.
man, there's a lot of opportunities to hurt your profile. So I think Villanova is ultimately going to make the tournament. I think they're going to end up a single digit seed, but I do think they're flirting with potential disaster because all it takes, and it really could be this simple. All it takes is a few shots going the wrong way in a game that they lose. Few shots go wrong way in another game. When you're in the Big East, you could really lose your tournament bid over something like that. Whereas if you're in another league, you have so many opportunities and the bad losses aren't really there that it's probably going to even out pretty well over the course of the year. I think when you're in a volatile league like the Big East, there's a real chance that just a bad shooting night or a good shooting night for another team could be what
Yeah.
ultimately does your tournament profile in.
Last question on the Big East. The only other team really in the conversation right now, Seton Hall. I had them as my last team in heading into yesterday, and then they lost. I mean, no shame in a road loss to St. John's. I think they probably actually improved their profile a little bit, only losing that game by 5, but it was enough for me to drop them out since NC State picked up that great win at Clemson. UCLA beat Purdue. I think the bubble kind of solidified around them a little bit, even with Miami's loss to Florida State. You still have them in, though. I'm a little surprised, but you had them 3 or 4 slots in before that. So I guess they had to drop a little bit further for you to fall out.
Yeah, I actually was surprised that they didn't drop further. When I started evaluating them, I was a little surprised they stayed in. But like you mentioned, the NC State win looks a lot better than the last time that I had put Seton Hall on paper. And so all of a sudden, I think that win on a neutral court, mind you, looks so much better that they were able to stay in. The other thing Seton Hall has going for them is a very clean profile. That was something that when I was getting down to that bubble range and looking at some other teams have bad losses. Seton Hall doesn't do that. They also have a good 500 record against quads 1 and 2. When you just look at their profile compared to some others, I thought it was clean enough that the resume metrics, I am a little bit lower on them than the resume metrics, but it kind of made sense to me why they ended up 40 there, just because it is such a clean profile right now.
Yeah, it's clean but weak, I would say. I mean, even the home loss to Butler I kind of goes against your clean comment. I felt like that's what NC State's strength was before a week ago, right? They didn't have any losses outside of quad 1. Then they lost at home to Georgia Tech, but then bounced back with a road win over Clemson. I need to see the road win over Clemson in Seton Hall's profile before I can start believing them. Because yes, NC State winning makes Seton Hall's profile look a little bit better, makes their best win look better. But I think NC State now leapfrogged Seton Hall because they picked up that great win over Clemson.
I will
Jump.
add
Yeah,
one
go ahead.
thing for Seton Hall really quick while we're on the topic. And I think
Yep.
it gets back to what we talked about with Michigan previously, where it's all relative, right? Losing at home to Wisconsin for Michigan is a horrible loss. I look at Seton Hall losing at home to Butler. I'm like, yeah, it's not a good loss, but it's really not that bad for a bubble team because the teams they're competing with have much worse losses than that. So that was really where I ultimately ended up with Seton Hall barely hanging on to a spot as maybe not a lot of great stuff at the top of the profile, but keeping it clean in comparison to their competition was just enough to keep them in for me.
All right, let's jump to the mid majors. Our boy Anthony Schneider asks our first question: does the A10 have a chance for more than one bid? I think definitely so, but it obviously hinges on St. Louis and George Mason staying clean because neither of them played anything close to a great out of conference schedule. St. Louis certainly better than Mason's, but do you think it will ultimately be a multi bid league?
I do. I think I would put it at 1.5, but I would take the over on the 1.5. I think there's a good chance St. Louis doesn't win the auto bid, and if that happens, I feel pretty good about St. Louis getting into the tournament. Even if St. Louis were to win the auto bid, I still think George Mason's got a pretty good shot. I mean, I'm not looking at those quality metrics and thinking they're out of the competition by any means. The team I see and the competitive drive that team seems to have, I could absolutely see them keeping this momentum going. And they do get St. Louis at the Patriot Center. Well, I guess it's what Eagle Bank Arena now. That
Yes.
uh, congratulations, Eagle Bank people. I remember that made you get a shout out. But considering they get them at home, that could be the game. If Mason can get St. Louis, their profile changes immediately. And I think Mason becomes not just a team that I have in the field, but potentially a team solidly in the field.
Yeah, I think it's definitely those two. I mean, VCU and Dayton are in the mix. I have them both on here as other mids to watch, right? Yeah, VCU, Dayton, 58, 73. They're both around 65. The resume metrics. I mean, they could theoretically get there, although VCU already blew their chance at Mason, and I think they lost to St. Louis as well. Well, yeah, St. Louis's best win is at VCU. So yeah, they already blew two of their chances. So it's going to be really tough for either of them to get in. But I think both should be there in the end. But that leads us to our next question, though, because they look good now and things can change real quick. John Benny asked about if things are looking bad for Utah State now, how quickly a one-loss team can turn into a severe bubble team. I think we both had Utah State in the like 25-ish range. Now we have them both in the 40-ish range after losing at Grand Canyon and losing at home to UNLV, which was god awful. I mean, that's so much worse than Miami's home loss to Florida State. I think they're absolutely in a lot of trouble. I think the multi-bid Mountain West is now in danger. I know you made that point a couple of days ago, pat on your back there, that it might only be a one bid league, but we both still do have the Aggies in, but I think that's more so of a testament to the lack of intriguing teams on the bubble right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Aggies are in what I'd call pretty serious trouble. Not just because of the way they're sliding now, but just look at their wins. They're not aging well at all.
Yeah.
Boise State as the second best win on your profile. Like at some point, the committee is going to have to see something and be impressed. And if I was on the committee right now, my impression of Utah State would be a team that's completely floundering and has nothing that I can point to and say, wow, that's a tournament team. The only thing they even have going for them at this point is pretty good, solid metrics. Like the metrics are better than you might think based on what you're seeing right now. But I just don't think that's going to be enough to hold them up. I think they're going to have to probably land some quality wins playing New Mexico and San Diego State. And maybe beyond that, maybe they're going to have to be really clean against the other solid teams in the Mountain West. I think Utah State is, I don't want to say, you know, on the bad side of the bubble long term, but I think they're solidly on the bubble. I think they're going to be one that I would have told you 2 weeks ago quite likely to make the tournament. Now I feel like it's a 50-50 shot.
Yep. Fun fact, that was the first Quad 1A win the Mountain West has gotten all season. UNLV now has it to their credit. So that's a statement to how far down the Mountain West is compared to previous years. Got a hit on Miami, Ohio as well. We didn't get any questions on them. I assumed all the questions would be on Miami, Ohio, but we both have them now in that range of they would be in if they needed to be, but that's assuming they have no losses. I still don't think they have much of a case for an at-large bid, but they do now have at least a couple of more non-quad four results. That win at Kent State the other, or was that last night, I guess. It's between their third and fourth best win of the season, and that's nothing great. I mean, Kent State is like 150th in the net. I just don't think there's going to be enough there. I think the fact that their non-conference strength of schedule was so bad, and I know our buddy Anthony was making that point yesterday that if it's even close, you should be. What did he say? Send in the committee like the screenshots of all the responses you got from the high major saying we don't want to play you. Like, hey, we tried, but at a certain point, it doesn't matter. You have to get the games. If you can't get, quad two games, at least get quad three games. Don't settle for three D2 games. I think that's going to be the Red Hawks' undoing in the end if they end up needing an at large. I don't think they can get one.
I mean, I think they could get one. They're just going to have to be exceptionally good from here on out. Really, like pretty much the entire year, I've thought they can probably afford to lose one during the regular season and probably get in. But I don't think they can afford to lose two. I think it's going to have to be one more or one regular season loss and then probably a second in the tournament. It's really going to depend on what happens with other bubble teams too. We just don't know at this point. What does the bubble look like? Some years everybody always talks about, oh, this is a bad year for the bubble. Actually, some years it looks pretty good in comparison to other ones. Like some years we're looking at teams and saying like, wow, that's a lot of quality wins to miss the field. And sometimes the committee does things that we just don't see coming, like West Virginia last year, missing the field with a bunch of quality wins, but then Xavier and UNC both having one quad one win and getting in. You just don't know how the committee is going to look at it and when you're anywhere close to the bubble. So I think Miami will have some sympathy in the room just if they can lose one game during the regular season. But if they lose two, I think that non-conference strength of schedule is going to be their own doing.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree for now. I don't think they have an at-large chance. They're going to end up with only one game against the Ken Palm top 100. They only have one game left against the top 150, and that's a home game against Bowling Green. The resume is just not going to get any stronger. I think even if they win every game left, they're going to lose ground in the WOB compared to all the other, major conference teams that'll be picking up wins around them. So I think if they run the table and then lose in the MAC tournament, maybe they have a chance. But I think if they end up with two losses on Selection Sunday, they're done. Anything else on any of these teams you want to talk about before we wrap up? Yes, no, maybe so. I lost you. All right, that's a good time to quit. Until next time, take care and enjoy the hoops.